Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about the continuum of love, balancing self-love and love for others. Joining me in the virtual studio today is Theresa Pong. With more than a decade of experience in counseling and social work, Theresa is currently the founder and counseling director at The Relationship Room. An industry leader in marital counseling, she has been featured in the national press on more than one occasion. Media outlets with the likes of The Straits Times, Channel News Asia, and Today Online have sought her opinions on relationship and marriage matters. As a registered counselor in Singapore, Theresa finds joy in helping others not merely recover from their issues, but ultimately thrive and blossom into who they were meant to be. She has journeyed alongside many hurting individuals, couples, and families, empowering them to turn disappointments to hope, enabling them to build positive connections with other people, and helping them to live their lives to the fullest every day. What a wonderful bio, Theresa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Lu, for this invitation.
Yeah, so I'm very curious, because the line of work that you do is important, but I also know it can be very challenging, especially if you work with, couples, in the marital space. I feel like it's a challenging space to be in because there could be a lot of potential issues to address there, and no couple would be the same. So I'm curious to know why you chose this line of work and how you got here in your career.
Well, it all started when I was young. Growing up in a very traditional family, I was grown up with the concept that to be successful in life, you must graduate with a degree. You must have a good family. Well, I graduated with a degree, and I got myself in a job in a large corporation in Singapore. But yet, when it comes to setting up families and relationships, that was when I hit a lot of roadblocks, and I got into many relationships that are toxic and not healthy. So by the time I hit mid-20s, I was in depression. I wasn't doing well in my work. I wasn't happy. I was at a very, very dark moment. And that was when one of my friends actually introduced to me to the concept of counseling. It was a 7-year journey for me. Through this 7 years of journey through getting therapy and also finding myself, this is how I recover. This is how I actually built self-love for myself and also learn how to redate and make positive connections with the people around me. And by the end of 7 years, that was when I met my then boyfriend and now a husband, right? So it was through this journey that my husband actually encouraged me, since I've gone through this journey and actually experienced the power of how counseling can change my life. Why not let's explore counseling as my career, as a mission for myself, and to help others who have also walked through the same journey as me. And so this is where I am right now.
Well, what a beautiful story. And thank you for opening up to us, because I know it could be really hard to talk about past experiences that might still hurt you to this day, right? Because a lot of the things that you went through sound like trauma, and, no matter how much you heal, sometimes they resurface. So today I think we'll have probably a really good lesson, at least to take away from this conversation, because I think, loving the self versus loving others, especially when it comes to being in a relationship, being in a marriage, that's tough, right? Because you need to balance the different roles and you also need to be your own person. I'm curious about this matter. So we'll have fun talking about it, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there.
No issue.
But before we get started, let's get to know you a bit better. So we've got this section called Have You Met Theresa? And we'll get to know you through some of your favorite things. First thing first, what is your favorite book?
Give and Take by Adam Grant. Now, in this book, he actually explored the concept of giving in terms of professional and personal development. So it actually opens my personal mind about what true giving is. And what I like about this book is he addressed actually our concern. How can we give so that we will not feel like, hey, we're being taken advantage of, and how to actually differentiate a giver from a taker.
Ah, really nice. I love Adam Grant, but I actually haven't read that particular book. I think it was the first book that he ever released.
I'm not too sure, but it was actually released quite a few years ago. And I just got introduced this book by a friend of mine.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. So yeah, I'll definitely read that one. I think I got it already. It's just pending on my list. But yeah, great recommendation, and thank you for sharing. Now, which movie have you enjoyed recently?
Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Cool.
We are all fans of Tom Cruise, and I'm actually a fan of all his Mission Impossible movies. But what I wanted to share through this particular movie is, we all know that he is an international star. He's so famous. Any movies that he shot is going to be a blockbuster. Yet, in every of the Mission Impossible movie, he did his own stunts. All right, he never cut corners. He didn't use other stuntsmen, nor did he use CGI. And one of the lessons that I learned from him is, actually at his stage, he can take corners, but he didn't. He made sure that every movie is done well. He put in all his efforts. And that actually built trust with his audience, so that we know that every time when there's a Mission Impossible movie that's coming out, we know that it is really his work, his creation. And that also taught me, no matter what happens, don't cut corners. When you do that, you actually break the trust with the people who actually believe in you.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you for sharing that. I haven't watched that one, I think, but I have watched some of the other Mission Impossible movies. Now that you say it, I'm kind of like, okay, I probably should get back into the all these movies, all the Mission Impossible movies. Anyway, we sidetrack. So the next thing I would love to ask you is whether you listen to podcasts, and if you do, which one is your favorite?
Yes, I do. This is actually produced by one of the our local Singaporeans who is very active on LinkedIn. It's actually called Welcome to Comfort and Growth by Crystal Lim. Now, especially for me, I just started this practice, although I've been in counseling for about 13 years, but to go into a private practice and this almost like running a business, this is new to me. And what I like about this podcast is, she talks about people who are passionate about personal growth and productivity. Especially in this journey to be a business owner, it can be very lonely. So in her podcast, she actually addressed all of this information, which we hardly talk about, as an entrepreneur or even as a personal development.
That's really cool. I love a local recommendation. And I'm assuming the podcast is in English as well, yeah?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, cool. So our international audience can definitely check that out if they're interested in the topic. Now, I would love to know if you have a role model or maybe multiple role models. And if yes, then who are they?
I have only one role model to introduce on today's podcast, and that is no other than Michelle Obama. We all know that Michelle Obama is a very intelligent, a very charismatic lady. In fact, many people will agree that she herself is a potential U.S. presidential candidate. But what I'm attracted to is not just her intelligence or her charisma, but it's about her authenticity. She's very real. And in fact, during her time as the first lady in U.S., she is so courageous to share that, she had a tough time in her own marriage. And she actually sought help together with her husband from a marriage counselor. So this is what I like about her. She is so human. And she actually advocates that if your marriage needs help, do seek professional support.
Yeah, definitely. I'm slowly learning more and more about her as well. So, glad to hear you talk about her as your role model. And thanks for sharing that. And finally, in this part, I would love to ask you, what is a course you've completed that really inspired you?
All right. I have actually also attended an e-course by a local trainer. This course is called LinkedIn Success Mindset e-course by Juliana Chan. I started posting on LinkedIn only very recently. And of course, I need a lot of help in that area. But what I learned from this course is it's not just the technicalities of posting, writing about your personal life on LinkedIn, but the concept of the law of abundance. Now, according to Juliana Chan, it is important to believe that the world does not operate on a zero-sum manner. If we always embrace a scarcity mindset, if we always embrace that there's limited resources in our life, we will always trapped in a state of unhappiness, always comparing and feeling inadequate.
Yeah, that's a really good point there. And I think posting on LinkedIn is something that I'm still learning more and more about because, I used to post quite a bit and now I'm kind of like taking a break because I don't know which content to put out there. So yeah, I think for you, it's potentially a little bit easier because your area of work is quite niche. For me, I still need to figure out what kind of contents would I like to put out. So yeah, that sounds like an interesting course.
Maybe can I suggest write something that you resonate with, something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, definitely. So that's why I need to find something that I'm passionate about right now because, it keeps changing. So yeah,
well, that's life about. Life is always changing.
Yeah, that's the fun part about life for sure. Now, speaking of which, let's talk about life and well-being and, this balance of love that we're here to talk about. Obviously, the show is about well-being. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of balancing love, what do you think about well-being? What is your personal definition and opinion of well-being?
My personal definition of well-being is actually the state of our health, how we try to balance this state to the ultimate. But for me, I actually look at 4 dimensions, B, P, S, S. B stands for biological, which is also referring to our physical state of our body. So this refers to, how healthy we are eating or how much exercise we are doing. All right. So that's the first B. The second P is what I call the psychological aspect of our health. That means our mental and our emotional health. How are we keeping ourselves? How do we manage our stress? And how do we actually give ourselves positive talk so that, we will always be positive and be at what I call happy state. Now, the next S is what I call the social. This is important, especially, in relationship to our topic for today. This is a part where we talk about whether do we have a social support? Do we know who to go to when we need help? And ironically, we are wired to connect. And that's why this component S is very, very important in well-being. Now, the last part, what I call the S, is spiritual. Now, I'm not just talking about the religion or the faith aspect, but it's also about ourselves, how we see our purpose and the sense of who we are and the meaning of life. So when I talk about the state of the health or the well-being, I actually look at how can I balance on these 4 dimensions, B, P, S.
Yeah, very cool. This is a new thing for us on the show because, we've heard quite a few definitions on this show, but I think for you, it's kind of like you're categorizing them in a different way. And I really like where you're going with that because I think it's a bit more holistic to look at well-being from different angles and aspects of our lives. And, definitely relationships, very important part of our well-being, right? And obviously, I think that is why
definitely
you do the work that you're doing. So that's why you view it as a big anchor for well-being.
Yes.
I think from what I know so far about your line of work, you work with a lot of couples. I'm not sure if you work with individuals, but
yes, I do.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm sure you've talked to, so many people, whether they are, talking to you by themselves or, talking to them in the context of a couple. You definitely would have heard so many things related to well-being or at least the part about relationships. So I would love to know if you notice any big misconceptions that people tend to have about well-being.
One of the biggest misconceptions that I hear from many of my clients, be it individuals or couples, is that they see well-being as the end state or the end goal. But what they don't see that because life is always dynamic. We are always living in a very fluid and very volatile world that we are in. And so well-being is not the end state, but rather well-being is actually a process. And in this process, we grow, we learn new things, we change, we shift, we navigate through all the transitions. But more importantly is, especially in the area of relationship, in the area of marriage, how can we pursue this process together with somebody that we care for and we want to be close with?
Yeah, that's certainly an interesting area, isn't it? And I think that is why we're here to talk about today's topic. Perfect segue into this topic of love. This continuum of love, I think it's something that people are always fascinated by or intrigued about because there's so much to learn at all times. And when you're saying, well-being is like a process, or I might say a journey, I started to think about the fact that, dynamics of love change. And you get more from new relationships, or current relationships might change. And I know it's mainly romantic love that you probably have a lot of experience in based on your line of work, but we cannot discount the fact that we also have other kind of platonic love, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so I think today we probably will try to be as inclusive as we can. Potentially we'll talk a bit more about the romantic side, but also we'll cover some of the platonic side too.
Sure.
So how do you view this continuum of love?
Okay, first of all, let me just go back to the very basic building block, love. All right. I mean, throughout the years, we have psychologists or even social scientists trying to solve this mystery of love. But the closest that we get in today's context is love is actually an innate need, just like we need oxygen or we need water. And we need love to actually survive. Without love, we will be isolated, we'll feel abandoned and rejected, and we will not survive well. So if we were to take this love as that basic building block in our life, how we see love as a continuum is, I'm actually approaching from the perspective of attachment, because how we grow up, how we interact with each other is actually coming from our childhood experiences. And we all have heard of this psychologist called John Bowlby. He actually said that, how we grew up having that mental model, how we interact with other people, all comes from our interaction, our relationship since young, especially with our caregiver. So going back to your question on the continuum of love. So if I were to approach from the attachment theory, so in this love, we have these two continuum. That is the best, of course, is what we call a secure attachment. And this is the part that we all strive to be at, where we can be so secure about ourselves and secure with the people around us. But a lot of times, honestly, in my personal experience is we are not 100% here. We always go through trauma, we go through negative childhood experiences or even adult experiences. And that shape us to where we are today. And this is where the other end of the continuum is what we call the insecure attachment. So in insecure attachment, we have two types, the avoidant or the anxious. And so we have this continuum, the insecure and also the secured attachment. And we a lot of times are somewhere in between here.
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that I have learned recently, the attachment theory. I have to say this year has been extremely interesting for me personally. And one of the things that I learned recently is exactly attachment theory. My best friend started talking about it. And then we at LMSL started developing a course about it. So I got to learn it. And now you're talking about it as well. So, this is perfect timing for the topic. And I think from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just my personal observation, is this continuum of love and, coupled with attachment theory it's kind of taught me that when you're kind of secure within yourself and you develop and you nurture that self-love, you actually develop healthier or, let's say secure attachment with other people as well. And it doesn't just apply to romantic relationships. To me, it applies to all kinds of relationships, whether it be friendships, family, colleagues, and then romantic partners. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, like how we interact with people, it doesn't mean that it has to be a romantic partner. Even at work, I also feel that, the attachment theory does play a part in how we interact with our colleagues on a on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to this attachment theory, right, as I said, I do see self-love to be a big component of how we develop and change our attachment style. So I would love to hear from your perspective, because obviously this continuum of love, it has so many different aspects and kinds of relationship. How would self-love differ from other kinds of love, like loving other people?
All right. See self-love as a fuel tank in us. We can't run on empty tank. And with self-love, we are able to have the resources, we are able to have the fuel to help us to be secure with ourselves, to be confident with ourselves. More importantly, to be able to connect with ourselves so that we can self-regulate our emotions, so that if anything happens, at least we can go to us as a resource to, help solve the issue before we go to somebody, in case if that person is not around, at least we know that, okay, let's use ourselves as an anchor first, so that will buy us time and we will not go into the anxiety mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why self-love is such a big idea nowadays, where even though it's not that new of an idea, right? I think there's a lot of talks. There are so many articles and books on self-love nowadays because of that particular reason. And I love the analogy of an empty tank that you just mentioned. It's very important to fill our cup first, or our tank first, right?
Definitely. Maybe I just want to add on to what you share. I mean, I know there's a lot of awareness in recent years, especially post-pandemic, about self-love. I want to stress that the reason why, the concept of self-love is not new, but in the past, you have always been living on the belief that, to have good interactions, to have, social support, we must always give. And because of this giving, there's nothing wrong with giving, but just that when we overgive and not fill our own fuel tank, this is when we run, dry, and this is where our mental health has been affected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's so important to keep that in mind, right? Because I think when we discuss relationships, whichever kind of relationship it is, the big component of, whether we are loving ourselves, taking care of ourselves in the right way, tends to get ignored. And I think that is an important topic to talk about. And just personally, based on my observation, women are probably better than men at this. And, I know there are a lot of other genders, but it's just kind of like to summarize in, the key categories, I would probably say so. And there's not much talk about self-love amongst men, as far as I know. And because you have worked with couples, I'm sure you've worked with, as many men as you've worked with women. So what do you think about that?
Well, I don't have the research statistics to prove that, but I do know that women tends to, the way women connect, we tend to come together, let's talk about it. The talking process itself is already a therapeutic process to help them to refill that tank. Unfortunately, I seldom hear of, in Singapore, where I'm coming from, I seldom hear of support group for men so far.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That kind of like maybe eliminate that or reduce that therapeutic process for them to just reach out to others. But we do see, in my practice, I do see men reaching out to us for counseling because they are also struggling a lot inside them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I overheard a very interesting conversation the other day when I went to the pub. I think it was probably a bouncer of the bar next door or someone who was talking about like, oh, I went to work and I just felt like so stressed and, and then like, I just need to go to the gym and like let it out. And then in my head, I'm like, maybe you should talk to someone too, and I feel like that kind of reaction from men in general, I hear quite often, is at least from the people that I do know, and would love to know about the statistics as well, right? Because I do think that if we get the statistics, it will be very interesting to start something different especially for men. I think the past month we had Men's Mental Health Awareness Day. So that's why I'm kind of intrigued about this. And, our audience might come from a wide range of backgrounds. So hopefully this will help them to start thinking about the concept of self-love in relation to love for others. Now, I would love to hear from your perspective, because obviously we've talked about the fact that, self-love can really fill our tank.
That's right.
But in the context of well-being, what else can self-love do for us?
All right. So I want to bring back to what I shared about the 4 dimensions, BPSS. So in terms of biological or the physical aspect of the body, of course, self-love, all right, has been actually associated with positive chemistry positive changes in brain chemistry. So we have heard of this term called oxytocin, all right? It is actually referred as the love hormone in our body. And especially, this during the moments of emotional connection, this hormone has been released, and it is also linked to social bonding and helping us to reduce stress, helping to improve our, mental health as well. So when it comes to P, all right, what I call the physical and the psychological and the emotional part of the dimension. When we have the support, of course, it helps to improve our emotions and psychological well-being of ourselves. As what we have shared about, even the talking part is already a therapeutic process to help us to improve our well-being. Then, of course, S. Now, we all know that socially, we cannot be living in isolation. We cannot be alone. And without love, without the companionship of our friends or people around us, we'll feel lonely and we feel rejected. And this is where we feel abandoned. And this itself will actually affect the whole well-being of our state of our body. And of course, finally, with S, the spiritual part, love also helps us to find a true meaning, a purpose, be it in community or in our own individual life. And that's why love is so important in well-being.
Yeah, definitely. I think that puts things into perspective, right? Because if we just say, oh yeah, that will help to improve your well-being, it's really vague, but the way that you break it down, I think it's much clearer now. And I also would love to ask you about this balance, because obviously we know that, love overall and the continuum of love, it helps to improve our well-being in all those 4 aspects that you mentioned. But we want to balance the self-love part and, the loving others part. And loving others include anyone in our networks that we show, affection for. So this act of balancing the two might be hard for some people. The reason, being their background, whatever it is that they went through in their childhood, just like you were saying earlier, that attachment theory by John Bowlby. And for some, they might prioritize self-love. And for others, they might prioritize love for others and neglect themselves. So what would be the potential consequences for these 2 different spectrums? Ends of the spectrum, I would say.
All right. I always see that, balancing between self-love and loving others is like a tango, like a dance. And we need to hear the music. When the music beats change, we need to know when to step forward, 3 steps forward or 3 steps backward. So likewise, and this actually takes a lot of self-awareness, experience, and also learning. So what I say is, if let's say you feel like, wow, I'm actually running on a low fuel tank, I need to know, okay, it's time for me to take 3 steps backward and tell myself, okay, maybe at this moment in time, I don't think I have the bandwidth to, reach out to others, talk to other people. Let me just have a space to rest. But let's say after you felt like, hey, it's like I already have my tank filled up, and I noticed that the people are actually waiting for me or reaching out to me. This is when I know that I will actually take 3 steps forward and say, okay, come, let's talk about this. I know something is bothering you. Let's connect. Let's do something together, or let's talk, about something that bothers both of us. So it is a tango. So let me just give you an example. A personal example that I actually learned the hard way many years ago. So I remember that particular day, I actually came back home very, very tired from a day's work. I reached home about 7 p.m. at night. And so around 7:30 p.m., a friend who actually lived very near to my house, and she contacted me and say, hey, since I'm free, can I come over at your place and let's fellowship together? But at that point of time, I'm very, very tired. Yet I didn't know how to tangle in this dilemma. I was so afraid that by rejecting her, she's going to get upset. And if I were to say, look, I don't have time to, fellowship with you, am I lying? So I end up saying, okay, please come over, let's fellowship. But during these 2 hours of fellowship, I grew a lot more of frustration, a lot of unhappiness because I'm so tired, yet I felt like I'm just giving more to my friend. So after the 2 hours, I just felt so tired. And this is where I actually learned, along the way that I should learn to say no. I should learn that, hey, if this is today, I may not have the time or the bandwidth to, have to dance with you or tangle with you. Can we have it on another day where I'm more charged up, I have more energy, and I want to be there for you? And this is what I call the tangle between the self-love, and loving the other person.
Yeah, definitely. I think, calling it a tango is definitely really accurate and quite helpful to imagine. So, because I'm a very visual person. When you were describing that, I just imagined a tango running around in my head. And I think a lot of people find this to be very hard, right? And you gave a perfect example of, how do I even say no to my friend? Because, it's just hard.
Hard. Yeah.
I don't even know where to start. Like, do I make an excuse or, how do I get out of this? And being honest is important for relationships, right? Because
Correct.
if you're showing love to others, dishonesty can sometimes wreck the relationship. Like, what if they find out that you're lying? So, I think this balance is where it's really, I think, challenging. Like, personally, I find it to be very challenging because some days I'm kind of like, am I loving myself enough? And then other days I'm like, am I loving others enough? Because sometimes I feel like when I'm running low on energy, just very similar to what you're saying, being empty when it comes to my tank, how do I even show up for other people? And sometimes
Exactly.
I remember this time I even apologized to my best friend. I was like, I'm really sorry. I haven't been as present lately because I've just been so tired. And, I haven't been able to show up for you as much. And I remember her saying, no, Han, you don't have to apologize. Like, you show up as you are. And, I'm your family. So you don't have to worry about, not showing up for me. You're already showing up enough. And that really touched me, because not a lot of people can say that to their friends or family. And sometimes there's this this really big tendency to judge or, feeling like they're not doing enough for us or vice versa.
All right. Lu, I just wanted to add on that, I'm so encouraged by what you share with me. It actually shows that you are somebody with self-love for yourself. Because as you say, it's your friend, it's someone who's special to you. And yet you took the initiative, not afraid that, will I actually, damage a relationship or friendship. You were able to tell your friend that, hey, I'm really running low. I'm not able to be there for you, without the worry, the fear that this friendship will be actually affected. And I thought that was so beautiful that you actually show and demonstrated what self-love is all about.
Thank you. Well, I do my best, especially because I'm the host of this Wellbeing podcast. I am also finding my balance. And I do find that it's harder on some days than others. But I do want to highlight that to me personally, I find that honesty is the best policy. Some days it's hard to find the word, but I think holding things back from others when we're trying to practice self-love or, we're trying to show affection to others and we're neglecting ourselves. Even self-honesty is important too, because we might not actually realize, oh, you know what? I've been prioritizing my relationships too much and I'm not prioritizing myself at all.
Yeah. And when we prioritize the relationship too much, we will end up feeling very burned out. And that's when we actually start to build resentment. And this is not healthy to the relationship that you are in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I think we have covered quite a bit on the topic of, self-love versus love for others. But overall, we're here to talk about the balance, right? So for those that are struggling to find the balance, what would be some practical ways that you can recommend to them, or how can they even recognize that there's an imbalance in the first place?
All right. It's a learning journey. As I say, it's a process. You need to actually identify when you feel burnout. How does that sit inside you? How does that feel inside you? So for some people, they'll say that I feel angry, I feel frustrated. So embrace the feelings and tell yourself when the next time you experience the same emotions or same feelings, you know that perhaps this is a signal from your body telling you that, hey, slow down, you need to rest. So embracing that emotions. And once you know that emotions, that become like an alarm bell to you. And be sensitive, be aware to this alarm bell that's telling you, hey, it's time to slow down, or it's time to maybe step up in building your relationship with the others. The second thing that I will also suggest and also encourage, my clients would be always set your priorities. You need to know what your priorities are. For example, if your priority is my family, then you got to tell yourself, all right, then in that case, I need to set time aside to rest so that when I reach home after a day's work, I can still be present or be there for my family. So you need to know what are your priorities. And with the priorities, you will know that, okay, what if something that is not in my priority, that can be put on hold so that won't burn myself out. And of course, the last part is setting boundaries. Learn to say no. If it's taking too much from you, just learn to say no. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are all great tips there for our audience. But I would love for us to be even more practical. So, those are already some great tips. But some of people in our audience might wonder, okay, but now I'm really struggling. I don't even know where to start, or I don't even know if I have that balance. Let's talk about something that is a bit more practical, one thing that everyone can try. So let's get into our practice section. Now, in this section, I would love to ask you, maybe this is something that you do personally, or you suggest to people who are new to this, especially when it comes to balancing self-love with love for others. They don't know if they have the balance, or they don't even know where to start. What would be a practice you recommend to them?
All right. I would say that maybe let's talk about, can we engage in difficult conversation that actually includes saying no? First, learn to say no. Okay. So maybe I just want to share a personal testimonial also in this case. As you know, and many people around me know that I am a counselor. So all my friends and even extended family always see me that, oh, if you have any issues, if you have any problems, talk to Theresa. So in their mind, they feel that I'm almost like, they perceive me almost like a 24/7 hotline for them.
Wow.
Yeah. Occupational hazard.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially with technology, with WhatsApp, with Telegram, I can get an influx of messages, like 20, 30 messages from my friends and my colleagues, or even my extended family, telling me about the issues or the troubles at work or in the family, and hoping that I could give them an instant on-the-spot answers to them. But some of these questions require my time to think and how to craft the answers to them, and that take up a lot of my energy. So this is the time when I had to think about what's my priority. If it's after work and when I'm so drained, I can't reply to them. I have to learn to say no, but in a very polite manner. I have to share with them that, look, I know this is bothering you so much, but at this moment in time, I'm really engaged, or I really don't have the so-called the mind space to answer those queries, because those questions that you ask require me thinking, careful thinking about how to best, respond or help you. So I will tell that to them, but I will actually suggest, hey, you know what? Because I care about you, why not let's set up a time? Let's talk about the issue. It's just only this dedicated time that, we can talk about your issues and see how I can help you. So in a way, I'm trying to actually balance between the love for myself, but the love of my friends or my families, to let them know that I'm not abandoning them, but I need another time set up so that I can address the issues with you at a better platform.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you raised, and you just gave our audience a real life example of what you do and how you navigate through it. I think saying no is probably one of the hardest things
It is
in
not easy.
life.
It is not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah, and I think for me, I don't know about other people in our audience, but for me, it took me pretty much my whole adult life so far to learn to say no, and I'm still learning. On some days I'm still kind of like, you know what, instead of setting boundaries, it's just easier to say yes, and I'll deal with the consequence later. And I realize that it drains me, just like you were saying, and that is actually an act of not self-hatred per se, but it's the opposite of self-love, because we're not nurturing our well-being. So we need to nurture our well-being first. And I remember when you said talk about that example, I think about something that I went through recently, where I have this friend, not a close friend, but a friend that I know socially, and probably more of an acquaintance than a friend. And he was like, oh, like we should hang out and do this, and we both like this activity. So to me, it's kind of like I have different friends for different purposes. So this friend I can do certain activities with, not that I'm super close to them. And he said, oh, we never hang out all day, we should do that. And I said, well, I don't think that's a good idea, because I'm very introverted and I don't hang out with anyone all day. And that is true. Even with my best friends, I don't hang out with them all day. If we go on a trip together, I'll need my alone time anyway.
Definitely, you need to recharge.
Exactly. And so I could not believe what I was saying out loud. And this took practice as well, right? Because previously it was really hard for me to say no, but I realized that it's hard because if I keep saying yes, I end up wasting my time, building up resentment inside my body. Maybe it's against them, maybe it's against me, about the fact that I didn't set my boundaries. So it's exactly what you were saying earlier. And I think that this fits perfectly with our conversation today. And when I finished saying that, he was kind of like, no, we have to hang out, like we need to go out somewhere sometime, like all day doing activities. That's what I always do. We need to do that. And I was like, no, I'm sorry. It doesn't work like that for me. Like I'm okay to hang out like for, activity, and, that's fun. But, I'm really introverted and I cannot deal with that. And that was the end of the conversation. And I was shocked at my own self because I was like, whoa, I said that out loud. I couldn't believe it,
Great job, Lu.
Thank you.
You did well.
So if I can do that, if I can do that and you can do that, I'm sure our audience can learn to do that too, no matter how hard it is. And sometimes it might mean that, we're not pleasing other people. I mean, I come from a background of people pleasers. So, I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with this. You just want to say yes and make people happy. But that is at the expense of your happiness and your well-being. And that is not okay. So yeah, I really love the practice of, setting boundaries, learning to say no. Now, for those that are struggling to say no still, because they still don't know what to do, how would you encourage them to do so? And what would be something they can try?
You know what, Lu? I wanted to actually share with the audience who's listening, tuning in. If you are not able to say no, there's no condemnation. Just take it as every time I try to say no, take it as an experiment. If today I can't say no, it's okay. Don't blame yourself. Just tell yourself, next time, let's try again and see how it goes. And this is what life is all about. It's about constant trying to find out what works, what doesn't work. And then we improve ourselves. And that's the process that we are talking about here.
Yeah, definitely. Experiments are important, right? Because the first time you say no, it will feel a little weird. The second time is less weird. But I also think here's a tricky part. Saying no without sounding like a total, something is hard, because sometimes you set your boundaries and they're so strong, they just don't care about other people's feelings. And I think that's also tricky because I have been on the receiving end of that. I understand when people say no for certain reasons, but sometimes they come across quite rude.
I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah, so that's another challenge to navigate. So how can we say no without being rude?
All right, use the I statement. And always focus on what I call the process or the experience instead of on the contents. So for example, let's use the case that your friend will approach you to say, hey, can we hang out the whole day? You can say that, hey, it's like, I value, always start with I value our friendship, but I don't feel comfortable. So again, you share your experience. I don't feel comfortable to share the whole day because I know myself, I know my stamina, and I don't want to disappoint you. So can we start with the experiment part? Can we start with maybe half a day, half a morning? And then let's see how it goes from there.
Yeah, perfect. I love that because, we don't necessarily blame other people for the situation, or they don't feel like they're, being blamed for certain things that they didn't even do. Using the I statement is a really good point because, at the end of the day, it's about our own boundaries and it has nothing to do with people.
Yeah.
It's just, this is how we're going to keep the relationship healthy, whether it be a friendship, relationship with your family, relationship with a partner. I think it's really important. And that's a great tip that I'm going to use myself, use the I statement. I'm not going to say, hey, you make me feel this. So no, that's going to be
statement, yes.
bad. Yeah.
And focus on your emotions and the experience, not the contents.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So I'm on the right track here. And thank you for sharing the tip with the audience. So now we're kind of towards the end of the podcast already. I'm pretty sure we've covered everything we can on this topic. This act of balancing self-love and love for others is something we probably continuously have to learn because each person would be different. So, you have new people coming into your lives all the time and the dynamics would change, continuously. And it's important for us to keep this in mind and keep learning how to navigate all these different relationships. So before we wrap, I would love to get you to talk a bit more about maybe something else that's not related to the topic, or if you have other things related to the topic, you can add on to it as well. This is your open mic, Theresa. Go for it.
All right. As a marriage counselor, there's something that I always advocate for individuals or even as for my couples as well. I have actually noticed for the past many years that what makes a relationship successful is not about the individuals, how smart or how pretty or how slim or how physically, fit they are. It's just about the ability to navigate difficult conversations. Without able to sit in the discomfort, without the ability, the skills to even talk about difficult topics, it doesn't help them to navigate through the various transitions. And that's why I actually talk a lot about let's sit in the discomfort and whether can we come together and have difficult conversations. In all the sessions, in all the cases that I have handled, actually there are many issues that has arisen in a relationship. But unfortunately, because they all thought that if I bring out these topics, if I address these topics, it's going to affect our relationships or it's going to make the other person upset. I don't want to talk about it. So I will advocate that don't wait until when the relationship has deteriorated or turned sour before both of you come together to talk about what's the issue that's bothering the both of them. So back to the question, just now you actually raised a very good point. How can we best raise a difficult conversation with the other person, be it romantic relationships, be it family relationships, or even in day-to-day working environment? I have this acronym called REAL, R-E-A-L. How can we be real to each other? The first letter R is actually risk. Sometimes, as I say, we have to take an experiment. Let's take the risk. Because if I don't take the risk, how will I know that whether this is going to work, or do I just continue feeling resentful, feeling upset about a particular incident or about a particular person? The second is E. Raising a difficult conversation doesn't mean that I be rude to the other person, tell the other person off what is bothering me, but let's show empathy. Let's try to understand what the other person is experiencing or going through. So for example, maybe if I may use back the example that you actually shared, the other person might be thinking, hey, Lu is somebody that I trust. Lu is a fun person. And of course, I want to spend the day with Lu. So if we can take on an empathetic approach, we will actually soften our stance and be able to soften our tone when we approach this person. So that's E. Now, A is authentic. Be real. Be yourself. don't go into flattery. Oh, you're such a nice person, but I don't want to hurt you. That's why I don't want to tell this to you. The other person can actually detect the insincerity. But if you go authentic and say that, hey, I just want to let you know it is bothering me, but because I value this relationship, that's why it's taking me such a long time to come to you to tell you that this is what authenticity is all about. And finally, let's go with love, L. Let's approach this from the perspective of love. We want to care about the other person. We love the other person as a person. Let's try to make this difficult conversation something that is comfortable with each other. And this is an acronym that I will actually want to share and encourage everyone here to adopt when you face with a difficult conversation. REAL, real.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a great tip.
Well,
and the acronyms definitely help to guide us through the process. And I do agree with you. Having difficult conversation is tricky, but so important in all relationships, because otherwise it will be just at the surface level. Another thing that I think I would love to add on to your point is it is going to be tricky regardless, when it comes to difficult conversations. But I have learned, at least for myself, to not be afraid of bringing difficult things up, because if you can bring something difficult up, but the other person is not able to respond in the way that is healthy, productive, and navigate through the problems, have the perspective of, this is us against the problem, it just means a relationship is not meant for you, no matter what, whether it be a friendship, a romantic relationship. A bit trickier on the family side. You don't want to have a big fallout within the family. But I just learned that, when I bring up something difficult and people are not able to cope with that, I just know that, what, this is not my people.
Well said, Lu. You actually hit on the nail. And this is what actually makes a relationship important. A relationship is positive when we are able to create a safe space for both of you to interact. And when you realize that when I try to step 3 steps forward, try to do the tango with you, but you're resistant, or the way that you respond to me is not healthy, we know that, hey, the space is not safe, and also there's no trust in the relationship. Step back. Perhaps the other person will have to go through his or her own journey to learn about how to create a positive relationship. But in the meantime, let's give us our self-care, our self-love. That's what relationships are all about.
Yeah, beautiful and very well said. Thank you so much. What a great message to close with. And before we let you go, I would love to ask you to share with our audience where they can find out more about your work and maybe connect with you.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on my website, relationshiproom.sg.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Theresa. Thanks again for being here. It's such a fun topic to talk about, and I'm sure we can go on and on. But, given the time limit of today, let's close it there. And next time we can potentially discover another angle of it if you would like to come back to the show.
Definitely. But thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed today's conversation with you.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.